Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 159. And if you tuned in because you thought we were going to be talking about breaking into comics, sorry to break it to you, but yeah, it's weird. Like, I never ever mention like guests and things like that beforehand because I know if I mention that, that's going to happen. But we had planned to have Eric Henson on. And the only reason why I mention it beforehand was because I was doing a video that kind of had to do with comics and everything, so I brought it up. But we're Eric had to reschedule. But this should be an awesome show, at least for me, and I think our guest tonight, because it's something I've been wanting to talk about with our guests because we're kind of in a similar situation, and that is kind of moving from well, Josh and I. Countless times we talked about how we used to freelance and then we kind of moved into we decided to take on a full-time position, and kind of a reasoning behind that and everything. But this is kind of going to be the reverse of that, because both myself and our guest, Chris McQuinlan, who we'll get to in a minute, we both recently got laid off from our day job, and now we're kind of transitioning back into, freelance, at least for the time being. I'm not sure what Chris's situation is, but we'll find out. But anyway, and even if you're not in that situation, I think this is relevant because if you are working a job, whether it's an art job or any kind of job at all, but you do art on the side, or you want to do art, or you aspire to do art, or whatever, I think it's really important to kind of have that, be building that on the side, have kind of that side hustle, because you never know when something's like this is going to happen. So I think I was in a fairly decent position. And again, we'll talk to Chris and find out, kind of his situation too. But yeah, it's just, I mean, because you have a full-time job, especially if you have like an art job and you're like, oh, this is cool. I'm doing what I like, or something similar to what I like. And it's all gravy, but you never know what happens, because just those full-time gigs aren't, they're not as reliable as maybe they used to be. But anyway, enough with the lead in. So let's kind of go around and we'll find out, let everyone introduce themselves. So Josh, what's going on, Josh?
How's it going? So I'm Joshua Kemble. You can check me out at quarterlystories.com, where I post a lot of autobiographical comics, black and white, that are about faith and mental illness that I handwrite and hand letter. And you can also check me out on topis.io, and I'm like about 6 subscribers short of hitting the mark to where I can actually start making some advertising revenue off of it. So if there's 6 people out there who haven't subscribed yet, please go to topis.io and search for Quarterly Stories and hit that subscribe. Actually, I guess it's adding it to your library. That's what they call it. But if you do that, it will really help me out. It might significantly add a chunk of a millimeter of a cent to my bank account, which would be cool. Yeah, because I don't know. You spend 4 years on something, like getting half a cent would be nice.
Yeah. And I kind of forgot to do my pitch, and I'll make it brief because I think last week you and Kevin pretty much took up most of the show just pitching my product.
Wait, let me set you up. That okay, so here's the thing. Like, speaking of cents, half a cent. Is that a reasonable price for something? That's pretty unreasonable. If somebody's selling something for half a cent, I'd think like that's crazy. You've lost your mind. But there is a man who is giving away an art pack for free, and his name is Scott Circlin. And you should go to Circworks and Scott, give them the pitch. What will they get for free by signing up for your mailing list, sir?
So yeah, if you like to create comics, or maybe you're just a designer or whatever, or you maybe have a project that you kind of want a comic look to or something like that, I have the Comic Maker Starter Kit, and it comes with Photoshop brushes for making comics. It comes with comic book fonts, comes with word balloons and templates and sound effects and character design templates. So if you want to just create superheroes, I've got a template for that you can kind of use to lay out your heroes. Just tons and tons of stuff. It's right there on the website at circworks.com. And yeah, all you have to do is join the mailing list, and the mailing list has a bunch of cool stuff too. I just sent out my second newsletter today. So if you haven't signed up, or if you're waiting, you already missed out on 2 exclusive videos through my mailing list. because every mailing list that goes out, I've got an exclusive video attached and also some tips and things like that. So the hits just keep coming. So yeah, definitely sign up for that. So now we're going to go to our guest. Sorry to keep you waiting, Chris. How's it going?
Good, guys. Good. No, that's all right. I was trying to figure out how I could butt in there and find out how much your newsletter costs to be involved in, Scott.
No, it's totally free.
It's totally free.
Yeah.
What an amazing deal. I should go do that right now, actually.
If you haven't, yeah. So Chris, what do you got going on? Do you got a convention or something coming up, or did you already do that?
No, so I had a convention on the weekend that's just been.
Okay.
On I think it was on the 9th or 10th of December, called Indie Comic Con, which was my first time doing it. It was the second time they've done the show here, and it's run completely by independent creators as well. And the whole concept of the show is that there's no fan art, there's no existing properties like Superman and Spider-Man and all that. It's purely just independent creators. So if you've got an indie comic, or even if you just create your own artwork, your own intellectual properties, it's catered purely for you. So it was a really cool show. I recently did a video about it. I did a couple videos about it actually on my channel, just talking about like recapping how I thought the show went, and how to pack for it, because it was really different packing for a show that didn't involve fan art. So I didn't really know how to prepare for it like I normally would. But yeah, it was a wicked show, and it was kind of really appropriately timed with no longer being at work anymore. It was a nice entry point to get back into sort of advertising myself again as a creator, because I've been gone since I pretty much started my full-time job. So
yeah, I wish we had shows like that. I'm sure there are. I don't know any in my area, but that sounds awesome. I would love to either be involved with or check out a show like that. And I did see the one where you were packing for the show, but I didn't know there was. I'll have to go back and check your videos. I didn't know there was a wrap-up video. So yeah, definitely.
I did it backwards, where I put the wrap-up video up before I put the.
Okay, that's probably why. Because I thought I think that I just checked out your most recent video. So, but okay,
yeah, today is actually doing sort of a real test. I've been trying to find a way to get back into editing videos, and as I was saying to you guys before we started, I'm now working on a PC, and I don't have half of the applications that I used to have back when I was freelancing part-time. So now I'm trying to figure out good ways to do it. So I did that one on my phone, but I should have been able to finish that one within a day, but because I was on my phone and sort of less attentive, it took me so much longer to do it, and I eventually got there in the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, is just, basically, making that transition from your full-time job into freelance, especially like, I don't know if that's the case with you, but a lot of times you rely on some of those things from those full-time jobs. Like I know a lot of times if they have Photoshop, there's 2 copies. So maybe you're using that second copy, maybe that goes away. Like I used to, just a lot of stuff like that I used to, that I had from the day job that kind of went away along with that. So
yeah, I was definitely in that position as well.
Yeah. So I don't know what is as far as when I heard the news, I saw your video and I was like, oh man, because I mean obviously I can relate to that too, having just gone through the same thing. And it seemed like you were pretty positive about it, but sometimes I know I do this and a lot of people do that. Sometimes it's you just kind of you try to put as good of a spin on it as possible, but it's it's tough anytime you hear that. And I don't know if this came as a total surprise to you or not. I know with me, I was kind of like every day I mentioned this, every day I went into work, I thought it might be my last day, and then one day it actually was. Well, it wasn't my last day, but they gave me some notice and everything, but I always had this feeling that I was going to get laid off. So, but I don't know if that was the same situation with you or.
I was really lucky that I was kind of tipped off the weekend before. And there'd been a few sort of hints over a couple of weeks. like before, I had a laptop which I relied on quite heavily, and they took it away from me with like a really sort of basic excuse, and I was like, oh, that's really weird, but whatever. I didn't really need it for I was working in industrial design at the time, so I didn't really need the laptop, so it was sort of easy for them to take it away from me. And anyway, I got the tip off, and I was like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And I had a weekend to really think about it and figure out what my plan was going in, and put a portfolio together really quickly. So I didn't know how long I had before I really found out whether it was true or not. And that Monday afternoon, they pulled me in and said, this is it. And I just sort of went, yep, cool, no worries, thanks.
Yeah.
Just, let's figure out the logistics, and I'll finish up. So
yeah,
it was, had I not been given fair warning prior that something might have happened, it would have come as more of a shock, and I probably would have been more taken aback by it, and probably more mentally affected by it too.
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I kind of knew, there was just so many signs and everything like that, so it wasn't a total surprise. But I was just kind of like, well, I'm just going to ride this thing till the wheels fall off, and eventually they did. So, and I wasn't the only one. So, I mean, it was, the company basically, just that part of the company just is like no longer a thing. So, but it's for me anyway, it's turning out to be, I'm much happier now. And there's some sacrifices and things like that, but I know we'll get into that a little bit. But so I don't know. I mean, what I know you've been working on your comic and stuff, but a lot of times that kind of thing is just, that's like a passion project, and it's not necessarily a big money earner. So I don't know, moving forward, I mean, what kind of mindset are you in? What are you thinking of taking on first, or are you looking for other full-time jobs? And in the meantime, are you looking for freelance, or what's kind of the game plan?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you say that. Like with comics, the first thing I thought of when I officially found out was like, oh wow, now I have so much more time to work on my comic book.
Right.
It hasn't been the case. I have spent a bit more time on it because I don't have to rush to go to work or anything, so I can spend a bit of extra time in the mornings. But the current goal is, like, I am looking for work. So I'm trying to get some graphic design work or illustration work on a full-time basis, being that my wife and I, we've got a little one and have to pay the rent and everything, and she's a stay-at-home mum. So either one of us has to find a job, and it would make more sense for me to be working, given my sort of, the trade that I'm in, the industry that I'm in. But in between that, I'm just doing some freelance work. So I was really lucky when I finished up. I was just wrapping up a children's book, which sort of gave us a bit of a boost, because I finished that up really quickly once I'd finished up work. And I've been able to find a couple of client gigs as well. So I've been sort of juggling some logo design work for a couple of clients, which could potentially have some ongoing work, and also just tidying up a lot of loose ends. And that's probably been my most busiest. The busiest thing I've been doing is because I had the Kickstarter recently for Monkey Junk, so I've got a small amount of commissions that need to be done, which would have just been done in the evenings while I'm not sort of doing anything. But now that I've got the time, I'm trying to just clear my plate and make sure that everything that was owed to anybody is done. And if I can do that before Christmas, that'd be really good. So that's sort of chewed up my time a little bit in between everything else. And I'm finding myself getting back into YouTube. I realized, like, YouTube sort of blew up while I wasn't really paying attention to it. So now I'm trying to pay attention to it and rebuild it, rebuild my Instagram. And I think I'm trying to find a fine line between, I'm going to look for a job, and if I get a job first, that's awesome. And then I'll just, keep going as I'm going before that. Or I'm going to try and make illustration work in the meantime. Because realistically, like, I can't spend, 10 hours a day looking for a job. I mean, I don't think there's that many jobs in the world.
Right.
So I'm allowing myself a couple of hours a day to look for work, and then every every other hour I'm just working on something to supplement my sort of current lack of income, I suppose. And as you probably know, with a redundancy, there is a bit of a payout. So I'm comfortable for a little bit, but I want to make sure that I'm comfortable for a little bit longer, just to make sure. So I'm trying to bank up the savings now, so we don't get caught in a rut later on.
Yeah, it sounds like you're doing it the right way. I mean, that's kind of the situation I was in, and I was kind of moving towards wanting to eventually get to the point where I could support my stuff doing my own thing, not so much client work, but that's obviously going to be a big part of it too. But I was moving in that area. So I've got a number of like streams of income, different things, passive income here and there. But not enough where I could quit the job. And when I had the job, plus I had all those things, it was nice. But so I was kind of, because I think I'm a little further along than you, because as far as time wise, I got laid off a little bit before you did. So yeah. I kind of started basically the same thing you were doing. Well, I'm going to start, sending out applications. And in the meantime, because you just, like you said, you can't just, there's probably not enough art jobs out there or whatever to, fill your day just applying to jobs. So in the meantime, just do my own stuff and continue to do what I was doing. And it was nice because it seemed like I already had a head start, but now I'm at the point where, I've kind of mulling everything around in my head and the clients and things that I do have. And now I'm at the point where, now I think I'm just going to make a go at just doing my own thing again and maybe stop applying for full-time positions. Cause, right now I'm at a point where I can, through freelance and everything and my, other streams of income, I can make the same amount that I was taking home. Not, this, of course, that the only difference is I've got to find time to, or I've got to find a way to make enough money to pay for taxes, because the take home pay right now still has to be taxed, whereas before it was already taxed. You know what I mean? So but the thing is, with the work that's coming in right now, it's not going to take 40 hours a week to do. Yeah. So I've got all that extra time that I can with that amount of time, I'm pretty confident I can bring in some extra work to kind of make this whole thing work. So, and it's weird because, and then I got in this position where, there were some like sort of attractive job offers. There's a graphic designer for like McFarlane Toys, because McFarlane Toys is out here. But the problem, it's when I say it's out here, it's kind of on the other side. It's like probably hour-and-a-half commute. So, I don't know if I necessarily want to do that. It might be, if it was like in my backyard, I might consider it. And then there was another like toy design position for a different company. And I had applied there for another position, but then they put another one out that said cartoonist illustrator. The other one was package designer. I'm like, normally this sounds like it might be definitely something I want to jump on, but now I'm at the point where I don't know if I want to do that. I just want to do my own thing, So hopefully that's a smart decision and just keep. I don't see how it couldn't be, but it's like a weird thing, It's, to me, it's like for every success story I've ever heard, it seems like it starts off with like, oh, I was down and out. I was down to like my last dollar, which I'm not. I mean, I've got some money in savings and stuff, but it seems like it's at the low point. And then that's when the success starts. So hopefully that's the case. I don't know. We'll find out. Or maybe people just do that to kind of glamorize it. Maybe it's not actually like that, But,
yeah, that's sort of been my mentality too. Is yeah. I've been thrown out on my ass essentially with no possible future work, and I have to make it work for myself now. And in the time that I'm not looking for a job, I'm in a lucky position as an artist that I can do more about it than just look for jobs and then sit on the couch all day playing PlayStation, in the downtime. And I've got a lot of reasons to try and figure out a way to make it work as well. I want to, well, just supporting my family for one, but I want to be able to go on holiday next year. That was part of our plan, and I want to be able to do all that. So the driver was there a lot more now than it ever has been. Whereas before, when I was freelancing, I wasn't even really freelancing. It was more of a hobby while I was doing part-time work. And now that I'm out of a full-time job, I'm like, this is the opportunity. Like, I in the back of my head, I know I should probably try and find a full-time job for security. But at the same time, I'm far more focused on making illustration work for me as a career instead. I've got multiple friends who do it, and I know it's a possibility. I know I've got the skills there, and I've done it, in the past on a smaller scale. I just need to really ramp things up. And that's probably the hardest thing, is trying to manage everything. I'm trying to, and it's funny because Josh was talking about this the other day, where when you're working from home, trying to, whether you're one of those people who just solidly works, from waking up until you go to bed, or someone who solidly schedules their day. Since leaving my day job, I've continued that scheduling. So I get up early, I do a couple of hours on Monkey Junk. I then spend the hour of which I would have been getting ready for work and going to work by just spending it with my family. And then once I hit that 8:30 mark, then I go to my studio, and then that's my work day. And I don't really come out except for lunch, and I finish off at about 5:30, depending on what's involved in my day. And then for the rest of the evening, I'm on the couch hanging out with my wife, just watching a bit of TV, or playing some video games, or sometimes I'm editing my videos, or just doing little bits and pieces on my phone that I can sort of still be working a little bit, but not intensely. And I find that's really working out quite well. Having that time, that restricted time, is making me work a lot harder, because in those moments where if I'm just sort of wanting to procrastinate and I open up Facebook for whatever reason, I very quickly go, you don't have time to be doing this. You don't have all day. And it sort of knocks me back into work mode again.
Yeah. I want to get to you in just a second, Josh, but yeah, I do want to put a pin on that, because it's something, as far as kind of framing your time and everything, that's something I want to get into. But go ahead, Josh.
Oh yeah, so we should definitely get into that more. I will say, like, I feel like you guys have said some really valuable things that I really want to highlight. Like, one is the tax thing that you were saying. I would recommend for anybody out there who's getting into freelance or just running your own business, that you should just like have a savings account that is literally untouchable till April, and take like 15 to 20% of whatever you're getting paid and put it in that account, because it's gonna come back to bite you in April. I wouldn't rely on like picking up stuff to kind of make up for the taxes, because that's going to be taxed too. So you know what I mean? So that to me, like my first year of freelance, when it was like hardcore full time, that was probably the worst moment, was April, when you get that bill, because it's like you're not getting a tax return. You're going to get, thousands of dollars due to the government, and in like a month, so it's like, so that's something I'd recommend. I don't know what the taxes are like in Australia, but I know that, pretty much the two sure things in life are death and taxes. So like insurance and saving your taxes are two things you should try to cover as a freelancer, because those are the two sure things in life that you want to cover.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, real quick. That's another factor why I decided because originally my quote for insurance was like way more expensive, and I found out that there were I was eligible for some benefits and things like that. Yeah. As far as to offset some of the costs for that insurance. So the insurance wasn't as much as I thought. So that was helpful too. So yeah.
Yeah, and I remember like when I was full-time freelance, like I'd have friends who worked full-time, and they'd be like, well, what do you do if you get sick? And I'd be like, I'd go to the doctor and show them my insurance card. And they're like, you have insurance? And I'd be like, yeah. I'm like, Yeah, like it's not crazy. You just pay for it like your employer does. Like it's
Well,
it's like
yeah,
it's
and I'm sure Chris is probably in a better position because
yeah.
I'm sure they have, actual, won't get too political, but I'm pretty sure Australia has some sort of
A better
insurance
scenario for
provided
that.
to get.
Tell you the last time I had to pay to go to the doctors.
What's
That's
that?
beautiful.
I can't
Yeah.
remember the last time I had to pay to go to a doctor.
There you
Oh
go.
man,
Yeah.
it's almost like you live in a civilized country or something. Anyhow, so let's not get too political, but yeah,
It's like we don't have guns and we get healthcare and I don't know this magical world that
and
according
you
to the
guys,
internet, don't exist anyway. So
you aren't in like a socialized like nightmare. I'm joking.
sometimes
'Cause-
it feels that way.
oh, there we go. So maybe I don't know. So okay, so that was really, I don't know, to me it seemed like it should be highlighted. And then the thing that you were talking about, Chris, where you were saying like something to the effect of like kind of like getting comfortable, like kind of looking for full time for security and stuff. But but then you mentioned like being an artist and kind of feeling thankful for that. And actually, I do think that's something that I forget to touch on whenever we're doing these things, is the fact that like as illustrators and designers, we have this crazy awesome thing that like even if you have a day job, you can go home and make more money.
Yeah.
Because you have a trade. So it's very similar to like a plumber or something. You could work for a plumber company and then do some plumbing for people on the side if you're short on cash for the year. It's really cool to have something that's a specific skill that people are looking for because you can contract. And to me, like, that's a really cool thing because like if the floor does drop out from under you and you lose your job or something as an artist, like we can hustle and find work. It's out there. It's just a matter of like really pushing and getting work. And sometimes it sucks and sometimes it's terrible to try to get, but it's such a better position than like if I were like I don't know. I just think of like most positions at a workplace where you would really have to just hustle and try to find the next full-time thing and have really nothing backing you the whole time. Like that, to me, that was really cool to mention because I was like, I've always been really thankful for that. Like if my wife and I have a tight month, I can hustle and find some freelance,
I've been really thankful. Like this past year and a half, like I earn enough to keep us afloat, but when we get a accidental bill or something, it always seems to sort of eventuate around the time that I'm working on some client stuff and I can just work a little bit harder, finish it off and get paid for it. And it doesn't affect us, financially because it's like, well, we'll just take that out and, we just live as normal now. And that's actually what happened as I finished up. I was finishing up a children's book that I was working on and I knew I was finishing up, so I like really just hustled in a few extra late nights, and that now is going to sort of cover all of our Christmas expenses for next month, which we, if I was working, would have been okay. But now we're, don't have that spare money, but it's covered us a little bit more.
Yeah,
and if I look at all my friends, there's only a very, very small handful who could, do, like you said, come home after work and do something for a little bit of extra side cash. Everyone else I know couldn't just go off and do that. Like their trade or their jobs don't really allow, or their skill set don't allow for them to just keep doing something extra. So if they were to lose their job today, they would have no choice but to find another job.
Yeah. I think I don't know. It's just an advantageous position to be in, like being an artist. Weirdly enough, like there's sometimes that being an artist sucks. Like our ceiling doesn't like, like there's a lot of career paths where like you look at the ceiling and it's just like endless. Like you're like, I could be making, the zeros just keep adding to what you could be making a year. For us, our ceiling doesn't go as high, but the nice thing is like the floor doesn't fall as far down. Once you've kind of gotten used to falling, because like really, to me, I feel like after being at this for a while, like you kind of, like Scott was saying, it's like, like Scott, you were saying, like, it's something you were kind of expecting,
Yeah.
And I think like the longer you're at it, like the more that becomes like kind of slightly anticipated because it's creative work, and sometimes a good thing lasts a long time, but you have enough moments of like working for like the dream employer or whatever, and they disappear, or all the art gets outsourced or something like that. And I mean, you see the story enough, enough people who've like been through it and stuff after being in it for a while, that like that contingency plan, that side hustle really it almost becomes like your salvation, like if you're like so I'm excited to see where this leads you guys, because I do think I think personally, subjectively, it's got to be difficult being in that position, a mix of like excitement and anxiety. But I also keep thinking about the possibilities and the opportunities that open up through that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
and actually just seeing you both like really inspires me a lot, because it's cool to see how you guys are navigating it, because it's tough waters, but it's like, you're making art, and it's like that, to me, that's really cool to see, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, the weekend for me was actually really hard. So after my first week of being back at illustration, so I stopped drawing, and drawing is generally my vice. And instantly, when I wasn't doing anything, because I just went into relaxation mode, all I was thinking about was, where's the next paycheck coming from, and how are we going to afford the lunch that we're getting today, and blah, 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 blah. And it put me in a really bad state really quickly. And like I was coming back to Monday, and drawing again pulled me out of it. But there was definitely like, that was the first tough moment for me, coming out of it and actually realizing like, oh, what am I doing? Is this working? Am I doing the right thing? Will I get another job? And you've been there, Josh. You get it.
Yeah.
It's very easy for your mind to wander around and start throwing doubt. So, and I think I probably wouldn't work as hard as I am now if I didn't know that was probably going to happen. Sort of almost as an active diversion to prevent myself from getting into that bad state.
Yeah. No, and I what's weird though is like I think part of what helped me succeed when I was doing full-time freelance was like, which is different than like, I mean, what I was doing is going to be different than what you guys are doing and stuff. But to me, that actually probably, I think a mix of stubbornness and that fear, like actually drove me to kind of succeed in ways I probably wouldn't have without that like fear, but this stubbornness, because I had this mix of like, not wanting to kind of work for someone else. And then also, so I was really stubborn about that. But at the same time, I was like really, for probably like 15 years, like freaked out about losing everything. Because even if you're having a good year, because it's like you have a good year, but you do freelance long enough and it's like feast and famine and stuff. So it's like, and I think that goes for any business. Like even on a large scale, you think about like business downsizing, they're not happy about downsizing, like we want to be growing, right? Like everybody does, even big corporate types, so it's like, but like the fact that that's a reality of the market and you're like the only person at the helm can be really nerve-wracking, but it can also be really inspiring and motivate you to like look in areas you haven't looked before, or like build up like some of the stuff Scott's doing is amazing to me. Like, and luckily you started a lot of that, Scott, like before, all of this, but like
I'm really
building your own.
that I did,
Yeah. Like building your own stuff, doing your side hustles, like trying different angles of that, like creative market. I think that's like, that's the kind of out of the box thinking that like a year from now, the fruit from that stuff you're putting out is going to come in, and you're going to be like, oh, like that, you know, it like ties up the it's weird. It's like, I don't know, at least in my mind, my memories of it are like, there's these little side roads I'd take, and some of them were like out of complete desperation. But then, like, you know, like I'm still benefiting from a lot of those weird little side roads today. And it's weird that, you know, at the time, in the thick of it, a lot of those would feel like failures, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, there's like, even the t-shirt thing at first really felt like a failure.
Well, you just got to stick with it. I mean, that's the thing, like the creative market stuff, you know, my first thing, it got a lot of traction, but even with that traction, it wasn't gangbusters. But a while later, you know, got picked up in a bundle, and then, you know, eventually more sales started to happen. So right now, like, I'm creative, and I just signed up for, like, but now I'm on 2 different marketplaces like that. One's doing better than Creative Market, and I just signed up for a third, which I'm kind of trying to get all that up there. But like, the earnings that I made from Creative Market, it's just sitting there right now. I've got a decent chunk of cash in there that I haven't deducted. I'm just going to save that until I need it.
Nice. You know? And could you share with us your password? No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, but it's like anything. It's like with YouTube or anything like that. When you start these things, you've got to stick with it, because chances are it's not going to happen like right away, but you got to stick with it, and gradually it'll be worth it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing is, a lot of that kind of passive income type stuff is like, it's not passive at first, but it's like, you know, a year from now, you're going to, like, if you get the same amount that you got like this month from Creative Market, but you haven't had to do any advertising or anything,
right,
and it's for assets you built a year and a half ago, like that's not going to be something you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot, like, why did I do that? You're going to be like, thank you, guy from a year ago. You know, like, that's you know, I don't know, that's one of my favorite things about that kind of thing. And it's interesting, because I'm watching my wife try to rebuild her illustration career right now, because she's just been a mom for a while, and my kid's finally in school, and so she has like a window, and it's interesting watching that, like, building from the ground up. And like, so she'll send out like queries and get like a response that sounds positive, but it may not go anywhere. But I'm like high-fiving her, because I'm like, you're sending out queries, like, that's huge. Like, because, you know, that's how it starts. It's like, you have to kind of send out. So like, I mean, the first time I got really proud of her was like, I was talking to her at a break at my work, and she was like, yeah, the zoo got back to me and they didn't want me to. And I was like, wait, you approached a zoo? Like, that's awesome. So like, she's hustling and trying to get it out there and get the work flowing. And it makes me proud, because I'm like, I can see, like, she probably can't even see it, but I can see it, having been there, where I'm like, if you just stay faithful and you keep plugging away at it, like, I think it works out. I haven't seen a lot of people. I've had friends get in really rough times, but the ones that kind of stick it out and like are open to kind of navigating and just hustling if they have to, like, it weirdly works out, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but
I landed a job last week for a brewery, and I never would have imagined at all that I would be doing work for a brewery. And it made me realize that I should be reaching out to more breweries, because who knows? And I just started, and even like the higher profile ones, I was like, well, it doesn't matter if I just shoot a query out and they don't reply. It doesn't matter. At least I shot the message out, and something may come of it in the future, or something may not. Like, I'm just enhancing the amount of people who are seeing my work, and, you know, noticing that I actually exist.
Yeah, so, especially if you already have, like, once you do this one job for the brewery, you've got that in your portfolio. And we've mentioned this before, but even if you don't have that, you know, just make your own, you know, beer label or whatever, and put that in your portfolio or whatever. But the more of that stuff you get out there, the more jobs and things you'll get like that. Because sometimes it's hard for people who aren't creative to see, you know, look at like cartooning or whatever you're doing, and if they don't, they have a hard time making that connection on how that might look like on a beer label or something like that. But if you can show them, you know, because that's one thing that I've got going for me doing this for so long. I've got all these different folders from all this work I've done in all these different industries. So if I have to apply to a job or freelance and they need to see samples, and if it's like, oh, we do like, you know, like pet supplies or something, it's like, oh, I've got here, let me go into my dog and cat folder, or let me go into, you know, whatever it is, if it's healthcare or whatever the industry is, chances are I've probably done something in it or similar. So I just go in and find something from there and send it to them. So it's always helpful that, you know, kind of the more stuff you have like that, and especially whatever, if it's something an industry you really want to work in, you know, start doing more of that stuff, and you'll probably get some clients doing that. But that sounds awesome. Yeah. I haven't done a beer label. I got approached by a company at a comic convention. And at the time, I wasn't really looking to do freelance work because I was just kind of concentrating my own thing. So I was kind of like hesitant. Like I was like I was kind of in a way almost pushing them away until they said who they were. And I'm like, oh, because a lot of times people will come to you and they're like, you know, they don't really have the means to like pay or whatever. So I kind of thought it was that situation. They told me who they were. And I'm like, oh, you're kind of you're serious. Okay. So then I was like, oh no, we could do something. And nothing ever happened with it. But yeah, I mean, those are, you know,
that'd be a good place to reach out to at least, you know, that might actually.
Yeah. I wish I would have got the guy's name. I didn't get his name.
Breweries are a good thing. And here's a little side note about breweries. I have a friend locally who does a lot of the local like microbrewery labels and stuff just for like their specialty beers. And not only he gets, you know, a small sum for it, but they usually hook him up with like, you're also our special member. So whenever they make a new brew, he gets to like go there and just have free beer for a night. And they do that for like a whole year or two. And sometimes they'll just hook him up for like life, because it's just like, oh, dude, like, you know, you're doing these labels. We can't pay you a ton, but we'll give you a bunch of free booze. And that's going to save some money if you're a person who likes beer. So there is that little side bartering bit. It's kind of like the little skateboard trick, which is like skateboard companies don't tend to pay well, but they do tend to give you copies of their decks. And so, you know, if you skate, like a nice way to get a decent deck is just do some art for the company. And then you get a small check and a free deck, you know, or two, or sell them, and then you can flip them for $60, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, there's all sorts of hustles, but like the beer one's one where I'm like, I got to get in on that, because it's like, I want some of that free beer. He's brought me to a couple events. Like one of them, they rented out a baseball field and just had this tent and just limitless beer for an entire day.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. It was great. But anyhow, yeah.
Thanks for that. But like what you were saying before about your wife, like approaching, you know, just sending queries out. That was a fear I had, was I constantly would go to message anyone who I just would figure was out of my ballpark, and I had to sort of convince myself, I'm like, it doesn't matter who they are or how big the company is. If I don't send these messages out to these people, then no one's going to notice me. And yeah, like, so you just don't know what's going to happen. Whether they say no, or at least they say, no, thank you right now, or, you know, you just got to get yourself out there.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that it's going to hit is pride, and pride is a worthless thing in our field, because it's like, you know, and another thing that can be a boost is just, you know, a lot of these companies that will kind of convince ourselves as artists that are like inaccessible or they're too big. You know, look at what they put out, and 9 times out of 10, there will be an illustrator who's got way less skill than you do, who they're publishing, you know, or printing. And so it's like, you know, a lot of it's just being realistic about, like, you know, if your skill level's up, like, which yours is, Chris. So it's like, if your skill level's like that good, like you're not, you know, out of the ballpark, like approaching people. You know, if you're like maybe just learning to draw, then at that point, maybe there's a little bit of revving up you should do before approaching. But I think at the level of where you've been at it for a while, you've honed your craft, you know, you can draw well and create good images. Like, why not? Because like the worst case scenario, you don't get any response. That's the worst scenario, is no response. The second worst scenario is they say like, it's just not really going to work for us. The third worst scenario is, hey, we'll keep you in mind. But those people you bullet point, you know, like come up with a system where you bullet point those people, just like your, you know, company would. Like wherever you work, they follow leads. They have a whole bunch of leads. Like any sales department has leads, you know, and then they have hot leads, which are like leads that showed interest, and seemed like they were going to close, but they didn't. And those are people they stay on, like, you know, which is why, like, if you ever talk to like an insurance salesperson, you blow them off, you barely hear back from them. But if you at all converse with them, you're going to get cold calls from that insurance person, like, you know, 5 times a year. I'm not saying to be the insurance person. I'm just saying, like, you know, that's like, we have to be our own sales, marketing, and so on. So it's like, why not treat it like sales? Like I was talking about this the other day, but it's like, if you kind of categorize like an hour of your day as just being your own sales department, and then your own marketing department, kind of break it up to where you're like doing all the different factions of a business, you can grow stuff pretty quick, you know?
Well, I reckon it's important too, is like the company I worked for before I left, I tried to keep really close ties with my old boss. So like the fact that they, you know, had to make me redundant wasn't a decision of I wasn't good enough for my job. It was literally a matter of pay cuts. And I specifically made sure that I walked out of there in a really good light. Like they gave me the option of not even coming back the next day, or said, why, you know, you can just see the month out. And I did. I just stayed for the next 2 weeks, just worked every other day like it was, you know, I was going to, you know, still working there because I was still getting paid for it. And a week later, they called me in for a meeting once I'd finished up. They were like, we've got some illustration work if you want it. And I was like, I'd love it. So they, you know, keeping those networks open wherever you can.
Yeah.
You never know where that's going to lead. And like you said, there's a good chance that I can call them up if I'm, you know, in a dry period and say, hey, have you got anything?
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because the art communities, like regardless of where you are, I know in LA, it's really small. And so chances are, because of the turnover that's pretty common in creative, if you're cool to your coworkers, they might work somewhere else and be able to hook you up with a job, you know? Yeah. If you're cool to your boss, they might end up working somewhere else and giving you a job. Or when their department is totally swamped, you know, you'd be the first person they'd want to hire, because, you know, like for even freelance, because you're already trained, you already know their system, you already know their thing. And so, and you guys already have a built communication. So like, yeah, not burning bridges is like that's really cool that you held it and kept professional, because that is one of those situations where it would be tempting to be like, oh yeah, you're going to let me go? Well, let me tell you all the things I hate about here or something, you know?
Exactly.
But going that higher road, like that's really huge. I mean, you know, and I think, like I said, most people I know got their art jobs by knowing people, you know? So it's like, I was talking to this guy who like is huge, and I don't want to name drop him, but he was like a Disney guy, like a big Disney guy in the NCS, and we were talking at like a Christmas party, and he was telling me that the guys who work in animation are fun to work with. And he was saying at Disney there were these guys who come in and they were like the best artists you've ever worked with. Like they were better than their peers, they were better than the AD, they were better than like everybody there, but they were dicks. And those people never ended up on animation teams again. And they last like a week and a half at Disney, you know? So it's like one of those things, because the animation community is really niche. It's really tiny. So it's like all those guys that person was being a cocky dick to suddenly got a gig at Nickelodeon working on a show for a year, and they staffed up with all their friends. You know what I mean? It's just, I'm just saying, it's like, I'm reinforcing the step you took, because it's like, that is absolutely the way to go, because being professional and like keeping things cool, like it never is going to hurt you, especially if it's sincere, you know?
Yeah, of course. And that's it. Like, it's not like I was going out of my way to fake being kind. It was, I genuinely liked the company and I liked the people that I worked with. So I didn't see any point in being an idiot about it. So
that's awesome. I still think that's rad though, that you did that. Cause I think, like, once again, that'll be one of those things that, you know, a year, whatever from now, you'll probably be like, that was a good choice, you know?
Yeah. Like it costs nothing to be kind. And, you know, at the end of the day, I believe that it'll generally always come back, you know, to sort of repay its value, I suppose. And you want to be that person, and regardless of, you know, whether you like something or not, I think you want to be that person that if a job comes up at Disney and you've got a friend who works at Disney, they're going to be like, oh, I know the perfect guy. Like, why wouldn't you want to be the first person they think of? Why wouldn't you want to leave a good, kind impression on someone?
Yeah.
You know, and genuinely too, like, you know, I'll go out of my way to do almost anything for my friends, and, you know, my work colleagues become my friends. I treat them exactly the same.
For sure.
I was just gonna say, so yeah, in regards to that, so my last day was Halloween, and I went into work. I dressed up as Gene Simmons from Kiss. It was my Halloween costume. I went because, you know, like, no hard feelings. I'm not going to be bummed out before it because of it. I'm just going to, you know, do the thing I would normally do, and just like, and I think that, you know, and that's something that I think they'll remember. Yeah, remember him? Yeah, it was cool. Last day of work, he showed up dressed as Gene Simmons, and, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean. Negativity in this industry doesn't get you very far, and that's coming from somebody who, like, I used to be super negative. I used to be like the person who, like, and this is like pre my long stint of freelance, but it's like I used to be the guy who, like, if there was like a birthday and everybody was doing cake, I'd just be like, ugh, like, I hated the whole office thing. But now I'm like, my perspective's so much different. And probably from all that, like, running my own business, because I started to appreciate, like, all the resources that, like, this business, like, you know, which was started by somebody who just built it. Like, the place I work, it was like started in the owner's garage, you know, and now it's like a full-fledged, like, pretty large business. So it's like, to me, just being able to kind of have that taste of running my own thing really makes me kind of less of a dick to people when I'm at work, because it's like, at the end of the day, like, this is kind of like, it just doesn't go anywhere, like, going with the negative. Riddler in the chats was saying the worst thing he sees artists doing is not putting their stuff out there. So many bad or mediocre people do put their stuff out there and they make steps forward, but the good ones don't, because they're scared their stuff isn't good enough, so they fall behind. And he said, because the others far less talented are, and the industries are filled with them. And so he was saying, like, we need you, like, the talented people. So get over yourself and sack up, which I think is totally true. If you're kind of like, you know, watching this and you guys are kind of like, you know, you're in the trenches too, trying to kind of either keep a job or, like, get a new job or start a new business or whatever it is. The onus is on us to kind of put it out there, because there's a lot of bad stuff out there. We got to combat that with good stuff, you know?
Yeah. So I don't know. I did want to talk a little bit about just the kind of the freelance lifestyle and how to be productive doing this. Cause it's a totally different thing than your regular day job. So, and it's something that, you know, if you if you don't do it right, or some people aren't wired for that, and you can learn to do it and everything, but you could easily just go and just like, oh, I'll get to it later. I'll just play video games and that type of thing. So I don't know. I mean, Chris, I mean, and you talked about this quite a bit as far as, you know, no, I as much as I'd like to go do this, I've got to sit here and concentrate on getting some work done and all that kind of thing. So I don't know what's kind of your day to day right now. Like, what are you doing in order to, you know, kind of making that, at least even if it's a temporary transition until you find full time or whatever you decide to, or whatever ends up happening. But just for right now, what's your day like?
Yeah, like I was saying before, I sort of have a pretty strict timeline as far as I get up anywhere between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning, and I use those 2 hours till about 7 o'clock just to work on monkey junk, because even though I'm drawing all day, I still just want to work on my own projects. So I want to get that out of the way first thing in the day, because if I don't, I know 100% I'll get to lunchtime and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to work on comics now, and I want to get that out of the way for the first part. And then, yeah, once I start my day, the first thing I do, and I think this is absolutely integral, and is one thing I learned to do when I was working as a part of the design team, was doing checklists or a to-do list. So the first thing I do is I just pull out my to-do list book, which I can literally show you. I don't know if you guys can see on my little camera.
Yes. Sorry. I know, like, Scott uses Trello, and my buddy Corey, who I do the 48-hour art check with, uses Trello. So I'm stoked to see somebody else who goes old school.
To me, nothing feels more fulfilling than literally crossing off a task.
100%.
And just going, done.
I just watched a video, and I've heard this before, but how they were talking about how successful people don't use to-do list, and that 80% of things on to-do lists don't ever get done. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but they're arguing for more of a calendar, which I agree with that too. And that's something that, I mean, I've got a rough idea of calendar, but that's something I want to implement more and just see how, if it improves everything for me. But I think I'm pretty good at staying on top of to-do lists, and I do like that feeling of crossing things off, and I do think I'm very productive because of it. But, you know, according to some videos and things that I watch, that they say that the to-do lists aren't that great. But I don't know, I'm not too sure about that, because it seems to work for me. And, you know, a lot of that's kind of like, I use my Trello board, and, you know, and a lot of times I'll put too many things on one, but it's also prioritizing things. That's a big important thing. And that's one of the things that they had talked about in some of these videos. But, you know, the most important things are the things that are going to immediately maybe bring in more money, or the harder things to do are the things that you want to get out of the way and everything like that. So there is more than just a bunch of stuff just to check off, because if you're just checking off little things or whatever, that maybe isn't as important. But I'm regardless of what other people say, I'm a pretty big proponent of to-do lists. So
yeah, I think it's important. And for me, I deliberately overshoot my goals for the day. So if there's any given day where I actually finish all of my goals or my tasks, then that's fantastic. But I don't think there's actually been a day where I haven't actually achieved something. But at the end of the day, I'll do a rollover, and I'll actually write whatever I didn't complete today and put it into tomorrow's slot. So by the time I even start my day, I've already got things that I need to do. And some of them are very continuous things. So they're like, update my Instagram, reply to comments on YouTube, email such and such. What have I got at the moment? Job search is in there, so I don't forget that I actually need to look for a job. All those just little mundane tasks. And like you said, Scott, I don't necessarily put anything into an order, but when I'm going through the list, I always prioritize anything that ends in payment. But if there are smaller tasks that I know I can knock out, or I can do in between big jobs, I'll generally sort of sift through those throughout the day. So if I finish if I've got to render an illustration, I'll do that first thing in the morning. Then I'll jump on YouTube for half an hour, do that. Then I'll get into doing some concept work for another client after that. then I'll have lunch. And like my old job, we used to work on a job bag system, and this is sort of my way of doing that. So we would do the same thing. We would just organize our jobs by easiest task to most difficult task, leave all the difficult stuff to, you know, the longer part of the day, and just knock out all the small stuff in the morning. And I'm trying to keep somewhat of that system for myself. And why I like doing the physical notebook too is if I actually go back into like some of my older stuff, which I can't find it now. Yeah, like this one, which is like, I think the first page, I can cross stuff off, but then if I hear back from a client on the same day, then I can add additional notes and go, well, I finished the line art, customers approved it, and now I can write flat colors.
Yeah.
And if I get that in the day, then I can add that in. Working digitally for those, like I think Trello is amazing. I've used it in the past, and I use it for like my YouTube videos and everything to take down on my notes. But on a day-to-day, I have to do it by paper, and I think that's probably why I've been able to stay sort of on task for the most part as well.
That's awesome. I think that I think it's just a wiring thing, because I think there's some people who like the digital. For me, the thing I liked about paper was like it would remind me when my computer was shut off if I was taking a break. You know, like it would be there as like a constant reminder. I always put my lists in like areas that are really obvious that'll just bug me.
Yeah.
But it is funny because Corey pointed out, he's like, well, paper can be lost. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But,
yeah.
And there's actually, this is a total side tangent, but there's this like children's book called Frog and Toad Are Friends. It's one I grew up with and loved. It's by Arnold Lobel. And then my son really loves it. And there's this story about Frog and Toad. They're like these two friends, and one of them makes a list, and he's all excited. I think it's Frog who makes the list because he's more the neurotic one, and he makes a list of things to do for the day, and like he does like the first 3 things on his list, but then he loses his list and he stops doing everything because he's like, I don't know what the next thing on my list of things to do is. So like him and his friend like walk around trying to find their list, and then and they get exhausted. They can't find the list, and they go, oh well, maybe we should like nap by this tree. And he was like, that was it. That was the last thing on my go to sleep. That was the last thing on my list of things to do. Anyhow, so my son's so like into that story that he just, because of that, has started making just arbitrary to-do lists, or he'll ask us to make them for him. So I make him these lists that are like, you know, they'll be like, okay, so we're gonna read a bedtime story, then like, you know, brush your teeth, like go to the restroom, like
do the dishes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
In the house. Yeah.
yeah. I should just start putting like subliminal things in there. Clean the house, like, you know.
You had mentioned about, you know, some people are wired for like, you know, digital or you know, actual physical lists, paper lists and everything. And I kind of do both. Like, I mean, I write notes down and everything like that too. So, but as far as being wired, I think it's something to really be aware of, are your habits and things like that. Because I was watching a video today that Brandon Dayton put out. He hadn't put any out for a while, but he just put out a new one. It was just kind of his talking about since he left his job at Disney Interactive and everything, and you know, doing freelance and everything. And he was saying how he had a hard time working from home. I guess he was getting distracted, so he had to kind of, you know, either go to coffee shops or one of these, you know, WeWork spaces or something like that. And, you know, and me listening to it, I'm like, to me, that didn't jive with the way I am, because like, I don't know, there's very few things that are going to distract me from wanting to create, just because that's kind of what I'd rather be doing. Yeah. And I think for me, going to a coffee shop, that would be way more distracting. First of all, you know, I like the fact that, you know, and I do make an effort to get out every now and again, but it's like, and maybe it's because I'm single and my kids aren't always here, but when I'm here, there's not as many distractions and everything. But I think for me, working in a coffee shop, that would just be, there's just the noise and all that other stuff. And I don't know, but I don't have a problem at all working from home and being productive. But maybe, obviously that's just me, because I you know, other people, you know, I know, you know, other people, I watch videos online. You know, I know like Jake Parker and Will Terry, they ended up getting a workspace out of their home after working at home for so long. And I think Jason Brubaker, I think he actually, you know, bought an off, or, you know, rented an office. And to me, when I heard that, I was like, that's kind of, because at the time he's trying to make everything work. And I'm like, that seems like a huge expense for something you could just stay at home and do. But maybe that doesn't work for, obviously it doesn't work for everyone, but for me, being here, it's perfect scenario.
Yeah. I used to run my whole thing just from the house, you know, and at the time from the apartment. And it's like, I did at one point have this big point of considering the idea of doing like an outer office, but it was for the opposite reason, because a lot of people have the problem of like distraction. I had the problem of like, I just wouldn't stop. Like I would never clock out. And so like when like the living space and the workspace just start flooding in and being the same space, it, for a personality like mine, it can be really destructive to everything outside of art, which is a really tough thing. So that was like, for me, that's the only reason I would ever even think about something like that if I were in that position, is like, you know, to just kind of be able to have a moment where you like punch out and you're gone, you know, because like what Chris was describing, it is very similar to like it's funny because you were describing that as a weekend, and I feel like I spent like 10 years like feeling that way, where I never shut off. So I would like be at a movie and I'd be like, maybe I should like contact that client, because I wonder if I do this, that would kind of lead to something, or if I and like that whole thing the gears would just not stop, you know, which is a weird but kind of fascinating thing. I don't know if you guys have that, but
no, my before I was in this studio room, all of my computer and everything was in the living room, because I would generally spend the evenings hanging out with my wife while I could get work done. So I deliberately moved everything into this room, which was sort of like a part-time studio, which I rarely ever used anyway. Whereas now it's like a full-time thing. And then when I close that door, I don't really like coming in here at night. And that's purely like an isolation thing. I don't like being away from my wife in the evenings. Like I've sort of built this habit that's our time together, whether I'm doing things or not. But like I still have those thoughts, but probably not as intensely as like what you were saying, Josh.
Yeah.
Like I can still do things on Instagram and message people, but to me that's such light work that I don't know, it doesn't really seem like work anyway.
Yeah. And I think having a son now, like I don't know if it would be as big of a deal, you know. I think, you know, because that just kind of demands your attention, like in a good way. And it's like not super hard to like be like, yeah, like, do I want to continue what I'm doing, or do I want to like fight with superheroes with my kid? Like I'm kind of down to like play superheroes and fight. Like that sounds a little more fun than what I'm doing.
Kind of like a nice excuse to be distracted, like when the kid walks in and just show me your toys, or like I do a lot of gardening in my downtime, so like she's getting into it, so she'd be like, let's go out in the garden. I'm like, all right, cool, let's now pull some weeds for 5 minutes and come back to work.
Nice. Riddler in the chat said, some need the studio atmosphere. I had it for 25 years and now I can't even stand the thought of it. The home studio is the way to go, but to each their own. And then Sketchson said he likes the social aspect of the office, but it depends on how likable your office mates are.
Yeah, I like that. I like, you know, when I worked at game studios and stuff, I mean, that was a really cool atmosphere, and the people there were really cool and stuff like that. So, but then like the last job I had was basically me with my headphones on the whole time, just working away. And it was, you know, it was just different. It was just different. So I guess it depends on the place. But like Riddler also said, I guess they worked at Disney Interactive too, and they didn't like it. So yeah, I mean, some jobs that sound cool, sometimes they aren't as cool as you think. So.
Oh yeah. One thing I think we've talked about multiple times, and like this is why, like you'll notice, like none of us are saying like, and that's why we abandoned our side projects, because like, you know, there's a through line that you're going to notice with like most creatives. We've mentioned this on the show, but it's like you'll meet somebody who's like just like got the coolest job ever, and you would just meet them and be like, they must have it. They must have the job that they're just like, I don't even need a side hustle. This is the best thing. And like I'll meet them, and the first thing they want to talk about is like, you know, I have this like children's book idea that like I'm working on, and I just want to do it because I just hate all the red tape. And I'm like, whoa, what? You work at like the coolest place on the planet. And they're like, yeah, but I just need to tell my own stories. It's like, it's this weird common thread, I think, between a lot of people in our community. And so like, and I think outside of our community, I think just in art in general. So like that's something else to kind of keep in mind, is like, there's a lot of people who have like sweet full-time jobs, and they're envious of people who have the time to work on creative projects, you know?
Well, I think that's
so many guys who I admire the hell out of who were like, dude, that's amazing. You're able to work on your graphic novel. And I'm like, really? Cause you're a jerk. Like, you know, anyhow, so yeah.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up though, because like I honestly thought I was going to be spending a lot more time on my own personal project, but I haven't spent as much time as I thought I would, because I'm so busy trying to do other work. So even though I'm freelancing and working from home, it's still just as, I suppose, arduous as a full-time job. I'm still doing work for other people to earn money.
Oh yeah.
To get to a level where I can eventually have my side project be like the main thing. If I could comfortably just spend at least just one full day a week on my personal project, I'd probably get so much more done, but I can't really allow that time.
Yeah, I think there's been like 1 or 2 days this year where I had a full clear day. Like my son was being babysat, like no distractions. I just had a clear window, like a clear just 8 hours, just like a runway, you know? And I knocked out like a full page from like pencils to inks. And I was like, I had that taste, you know, like maybe twice this year. And every time I get that taste, I'm just like, I need to be able to do this more. Like, cause it's like, you see the progress you can make when like when the runway is clear, you know? So I think, like Scott, like what you're trying to build right now, man, that's, you know, kind of the dream. So like, to me, it's really exciting to see that. Like I'm excited to see where that goes, because that's where we all want to go.
Yeah, it's a different dream than before, because I mean I freelanced for a number of years before, but now the end goal is a little more, you know, my personal stuff. You know, of course, you know, freelance is going to be a part of that to make that, you know, a reality. But so it's a little different. So you know, it'll be interesting. But yeah, I just, in some ways, you know, when you get that pink slip, it's kind of it can be a blessing, you know. So there hasn't been too many days since I got laid off where I've been kind of bummed out. Like I'm every day I'm like, I'm just, I guess I'm seeing the opportunity in it now. I mean, you know, who knows, you know, any little thing can happen, because it's, you know, everything is a little tighter as far as financially and everything. So, you know, there could, and who knows what can happen, you know. But for right now, it's like, I'm just having a lot more fun, and more my attitudes, you know. I'm looking forward to the stuff that I can accomplish, I think, you know, having more time and everything. So
just out of curiosity, Scott, do you have that fear that there could be a point where you don't really have much choice as far as financially, you know, that you need to find a job and you might have to settle for a job that you probably don't want, like going to retail or something like that?
Yeah. My biggest fear right now is that, like I've got like one major kind of client, that's an ongoing client. But if something happens and that goes away, I mean, you definitely don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And I'm not really, because I'm working on other things, but that's kind of what's allowing me to do this other stuff. So as long as that continues, you know, that's a good thing. But it is always good because you never know. I mean, and I've been through this enough time to know that, you know, I was in a sort of a similar situation before I took my previous job, where I had this one freelance game design client, and yeah, it was paying me really well, and you know, more than I'd ever made. And then, you know, all of a sudden they were like, you know what, we don't want to sink any more money into any of these projects, and we're just going to stop doing it. And it just like ended like that. And like, oh well, the gravy train's over. So you never know. I mean, you know, you definitely want to, you know, so, you know, there's some other things I got to follow up on too, some other projects and things. So I definitely don't want, you know, because you just don't want one major source of income, because you're in a better position if you can get a lot of smaller sources of income. So if one goes away, you're still okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm moving towards.
Yeah, I've one of the battles I'm sort of struggling with at the moment is, even though I've got a bit of work, I'm starting to really doubt like what I'm charging, and what I'm charging has increased significantly since I last freelanced. And I'm absolutely surprised at how open and accepting people have been of those prices on a professional level, which has been fantastic and makes me kick myself that I wasn't charging this earlier.
Right.
But the amount of time that it takes to do the things I'm doing, so like if I was doing logo design, I'd need to be able to do 3 finished logo designs a week to comfortably survive. But at the rate that, you know, sort of back and forth in with the customers, it can generally take up to 2 weeks. So I'd need to be doing 6 or more logo designs every fortnight consecutively to make that work. And I know that that's not feasible. So I'm trying to figure out how best to really manage what I'm charging for the time that I'm going to be spending, and accounting for, you know, conversing with the client and talking to them, and you know, sending stuff back and forth for approvals, etc., etc. Like the timeline is a little bit more lenient, and that's not a really safe space to be in.
Yeah, I think one thing that helped me with that is like, and you're probably already doing this, but this is just on that topic, is like, you know, the more you kind of do it, the more you really have a pretty realistic time frame of how long it takes to execute. And so before you quote, like, you always want to actually figure out what you have to make hourly to make your nut, or whatever it is that you need to make by the end of the month. And so it's like, you know, like feasibly, it's not sustainable to do 6 logo designs every other day. Like that would be insane. So what you'd need to, like, you know, in that case, if you wanted to gear yourself towards logo work, you'd need to really be charging more like branding style prices, and maybe it could sustain you for a week, you know, or for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I think it's like a matter of like, you know, your own skill level, and don't fall into the Fiverr trap, you know, because if you fall into the Fiverr trap, then you're basically working, you know, 20 hours for like $30, you know. And at the point that it's not, like, to me, this was something I always used to say on BIPT, but it's like, I think it's important to reiterate to cartoonists and to artists. It's like, if you're charging less for your art than you would make at like a fast food job, get the fast food job and then make the art you want to make, you know? So like whatever you're charging should be at least more than a fast food job. And a lot of people will charge a flat rate that sounds really good at first, not include revisions into their pricing, because like you should have a limit to the amount of revisions you do. Like if the client completely changes their objective, that's a different job, you know? And if you kind of build that into your contract, and then also include, don't tell them you're hourly, because then you'll end up, that can lead to like disputes about like, why should I pay you? Like, because it'll usually be a very large sum hourly that you're charging. but in reality, it's a very small sum because of the reality of freelance, you know? So it's like, never give away your hourly unless you're working in house. And like, if you're freelancing in house, sure, work hourly, but yeah, like I'd calculate out, like, you know, if you need to make like $50 an hour or whatever, then that's what you charge at. If you're going to make 80 an hour, you know, it's going to take you 8 hours, 80 times 8, you know what I mean? And
theoretically, you'd be putting in an offset on that as well for the times that you're not working too, I suppose, to cover yourself.
Well,
for those
you don't want to offset it too much though, because you still need to be fair and equitable to the person. Yeah. But you also need to realize, like, whatever you're charging, taxes are going to come out of. Whatever you're charging, like, should cover, like, if you're going to work 8 hours straight, it should cover lunch. It should cover a 10 minute. It should cover your materials, you know, so it should cover the portion of the electricity you're using during that time. So it's like, you know, you'll come up with a rate, and it's going to sound fairly large, but it's not that large when it's presented as a flat fee. And, you know, you need to be competitive with other people out there. But I see this a lot with cartoonists in particular. Illustrators are a little better at this. And I wish more cartoonists would kind of pick up where illustrators are. But like Scott and I have talked about it. One of the reasons I don't tend to do like commissions, just straight up commissions, is like the rates are just insane. Like that most people charge for a commission. If somebody offered you that for an illustration, like no illustrator in their right mind would take that work. And so, like, to me, I always feel like if it's not going to be somewhat equivalent to an illustration, then in pay, then I don't want to undervalue myself, you know?
Yeah, I was just listening to, have you heard of these things, this thing called adoptables?
No, yeah.
No, what are adoptables?
So I guess it's where you create a character, and then you just basically, you know, somebody buys it and they can do whatever they want with it. But it's like these things are like, it's like they're just basically giving these things away. And I mean, back in the days, if I created a character, I mean, there were like certain usage rights and everything like that. And it's kind of scary that might go away, because it's just like people are just giving things away. And again, it's a lot of like people that are like cartoonists and stuff like that who are, you know, and that's, again, I don't really do a lot of commissions either, because it's just, there's really not a lot of money. And I've seen a few people that can kind of make it work, and sometimes it's more of a bulk thing. But I mean, it's hard for me to do a commission when I know I can do, you know, an illustration or a logo design and and make quite a bit more for probably less time. So it's kind of hard for me to justify that. So I don't know.
So, and like, that's, by the way, I'm not trying to knock commissions. I'm just saying, I don't think the artists out there who offer these things realize what they could be getting for illustration work. And then also, when they're undervaluing their illustration work, like here's the weird thing. Like, if you just, I'll take like two relatively like small flat rates. Like, let's say I made a deal for like a t-shirt design that was like $250 flat. Right. If someone else charges $200 flat, by the time I've done 3 jobs, they've had to do, I'm trying to do the math here. Was it 3 jobs that would equate? No, by the time I've done 3 jobs, they now have to do 4 to make up for what I'm making. So what seems like a small difference becomes like a massive difference in what you're making and in the amount of work you have to do to make a living. And so it's one of those things of like, you don't want to overvalue yourself for sure. And like, now I'm blanking out on his name. We've talked about, Aaron Draplin had I think I'm pronouncing that right now, right?
Yeah.
Scott? Okay. When I saw him at Adobe Max, he did have on the polar opposite of this, like a really valuable statement about just kind of doing things that were cool and good. And so like he'd show his portfolio that's like up for everyone to see, and he'd be like, this looks really great, right? yeah, this was for my buddy and I did it for free because he's a friend and I made this. Oh, and then this I did for President Obama. And then he'd like click through all this stuff and it all looks equal in quality. But some of it he got paid like nothing for. Some of it he swapped for beer. Some of it he got paid like ridiculous amounts for. So I do think there's some, and he swears by that as a method to like grow community and clients and stuff. And I don't think that's wrong, but I also don't think it's right as an artist to like undervalue yourself and undercut your own budget, because at the end of the day, like if you want to do it for a living, you have to charge a living wage, you know?
Yeah.
And the only times I'd take like a little less than maybe what I'd want when I'm freelancing is if I'm doing it in-house and it's a steady gig that's like significantly long. So at least there's some stability in it, you know?
Yeah. And they're also paying for your computers and all that other stuff.
And the resources and all that's on them, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, like I said, you know, it's sneaky because, you know, a lot of, it seems like a lot of people would think it seems sneaky when you see the rates that like most professional freelance illustrators, like who do it for a living, like what they charge, it might seem ridiculously high, but when you do the math, you realize like what they're actually taking out of it's not bad. It's just not that different than what you'd get like working a regular job, you know, a better job than fast food, but a fairly average job, you know. It's not extraneous, and anything below that is like starting to kind of get to, like I said, there. And I learned this the hard way because I took a couple of gigs that were really bad paying when I was young in art. And then I had this dawning moment of like, well, I hate drawing this thing for this person. I want to draw my own thing, and I'm making less than I'd make at a fast food joint. Why am I taking this work? You know?
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'd rather flip burgers. That's a lot less like brain power and soul crushing than like coming up with like, you know, create like doing the headache of like creative thinking and like layout and design. As much as it's fun, it's like, you know, when you get into the commerce part of it, you want to be a businessman, you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but that definitely helped me a lot. Was like just especially the hourly thing, like figure out what you need to make hourly. And I guess the way I'd equate it is like what you need to make hourly if you had a decent workload for the week. Like if I got, you know, 4 of these, can I do 4 of these a week? Is that sustainable? Okay, what would I need to do to make a living doing 4 of these? You know? And then like how long does it take? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard until you, like for me, once I actually charged someone more than what I thought I was worth and sort of put forward that price and just sat there freaking out, you know, wondering whether I was going to scare them away or not. And once you actually realize that people are willing to pay that higher price for the quality of work that you're doing, it makes it so much easier after the fact too.
Yeah. And you probably will scare some people away, but those are the people that you're probably going to regret taking the job anyway. So
here's another thing.
There was one job I quoted last week, and I came up with a quote of what it would cost. It would have been at least a month's worth of work, and I figured out what I would need for that month to work. And then I overquoted by, I think it was like $1,000 or something. And you know, knowing that I can barter with them as well, so having a higher price point, if they went for it, then fantastic, I'm ahead. And then if they said no, that's too much, I know that I can knock them down as well. And I'll sort of, you know, becoming more comfortable with preparing the higher price point and understanding that, you know, there are people who you know, might need to barter. And like if it's like you said, sometimes it can be maybe you don't want to work for that person, but if it's a, you know, steady income for me for a month, I sometimes would rather take that.
Yeah, if it's a client, like the easiest people to give a rate that, and it's funny because you'll think like, especially you'll think for a little bit like, oh, I'm undercharging or I'm overcharging. And then the second you start closing those jobs, you're like, I've been undercharging for this many years. And you're like, I lost how much money from not. So it's like a weird thing. But the one thing I will say is it's really easy when it's a job you really don't want to do, but it's like, it's viable. So you just, like, for me, if somebody comes to me with a job I absolutely do not want to do, I'll quote them a rate that'll make it worth my while. And if they take it, then it's like, hey, you know, that was my rate. You know, it's like my sellout point, you know, where I'm like, this is how much you'd have to give me to, like, you know, to take this thing that I really don't want to do. Another trick too with it is like a sales, you know, you just got to read up on sales. Like, and this isn't for you, but for anybody watching who's like wanting to get into freelance, read up on sales. Because there's like what you were just talking about is a sales strategy. When you're doing sales, like when you go into a car dealer, the price that's on the sticker is rarely the price you pay, right? Like, why are we any different? Like, that doesn't make any sense. We're selling a service, you know, there's going to be negotiation. It's smart to have like a base point that you can go down to and then a reasonable point, you know? But you always want to be fair too. But another thing I'd say that has gotten me out of hot water more than one time is just having them quote their budget first. Cause it's like,
that could be so hard too.
You just, like, they ask you, what do you charge? And you say, I don't, like, here's the thing. Like, I need to know a little more information about what you want. And it'd be good to know your budget, you know, because like, and there's some industries in particular, like oddly enough in Australia, I did a bunch of stuff for Women's Health Australia. That was a client of mine for like a long time, and they paid really fair. They came to me wanting me to do some spread illustrations of like yoga poses and stuff. And my gut instinct was to like quote them a rate that I thought was a little exorbitant, but I was like, I'll quote it. But then I had them give me their budget first, and thank God, because their flat rate, their base rate that they pay illustrators was like way more than what I was going to quote. So I would have undercut myself, you know, probably by like $1,000. Like, you know, like, so it's like, you know, and the exchange rate worked out well too, because I guess the dollar value equated well for me in that scenario. But it was like, it was just, you know, to me, sorry, what?
Must have been a good time back then. It's pretty bad now.
Yeah, it was pretty good at the time, but anyhow, so like that's one of those cases where I had that happen more and more. The more I would just be like, well, what's your budget, you know? And surprisingly, like a lot of people will share their budget, and the neat thing is if they share a budget that's like way too small, then you're in a position where you can offer them something else. You know, you can be like, I know you have this in mind, like this crowd scene that's like 50 billion colors and 1 million people and is going to take 20 years to draw. Working with your budget, here's what we can do. We could do like a more gestural background of maybe like focus more tightly on a few people in the crowd. So it gives the idea of a crowd. So it's less people, takes less time to draw. It's more in your budget. Maybe it can be like 2 tones of color instead of like full color, because that'll cut down the coloring time, you know? And like, so then you're in a position where you can work with the client, you know, more and kind of get the gig still, get that pay, but you know, at that point you're getting paid fair, you know? I don't know. Did you find that being quoted other,
sorry, I just had a mental blank then. So when a customer would give you their budget, did you find that would then start dictating your prices after doing that job? Would your prices change knowing that there's other places out there willing to pay you more?
Well, yeah. And I mean, the clients I looked for too changed, you know, because it's like, you know, and I came up with like a minimum. So, you know, if a place was like a mom and pop, I wouldn't expect they'd have the budget of like, you know, like Google or something, you know. But but I did have a rate that like, especially at the peak of when I was doing a lot of t-shirts, I would get query, like, you know, at first it was just me sending out all the time, but then this transition happened, and this happens, you know, when you start building the whole business and stuff, like there's usually like this tipping point where it flips, and now you're getting queries all the time. And, and that's where it kind of went, but it would literally be like maybe like 5 or 6 times a day at least that I would have to turn down t-shirt clients because the rate they were offering was just, it was terrible. And they'd be like, but I'll give you a free t-shirt. And I'd be like, I don't need free like I get free t-shirts. I don't need more free t-shirts, you know, like I need bread, you know, in my refrigerator, you know, I need food basically. I don't need fulfillment. Like I just need food on the table. So, but part of that being able to turn them down, which always hurt, was like the fact that I had a base. Like I knew the lowest I would work for a t-shirt design. And that base was a certain style. And if they wanted a style that was out of the range, you know, it was kind of like somebody coming into a jewelry shop and they're like, I want to buy this like really priceless thing. And you're like, well, sir, let me show you this over here. You know what I mean? Because and you'll notice that when you walk in a jewelry store, the first thing they ask you is your budget. And it's not necessarily to gouge you. It's literally like they have no idea what you can buy when you walk in there. So they're not sure whether to talk about the like Rolexes, or maybe they should start talking about like the Seiko watches, you know, that are like, they're high quality, but they're not like, you know what I mean? It's like 2 different ballparks. So it's like, that helps.
And their goal is to give you the best for the money you can spend, you know? And that's the same thing with illustration, or, you know, I mean, not if you don't have a huge budget, there's probably still something in many cases that you can offer. It may, like you said, you may have to throw a different idea at them or whatever, but it's not asking what their budget is. It isn't so you can gouge them. It's so you can figure out what they want and what you can do for them. Yeah, I know we're getting kind of long on time, so I don't know if there's anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we start wrapping everything up.
No, I'm pretty good.
Cool. All right, so let's kind of make our way around. So yeah, Josh, where can everyone find you?
Oh, you can find me at quarterlystories.com. There's actually a new page posted there, like within the process of this. So go read it. And then you can also go to topis.io and be one of those 6 people to get me my half a cent on there by searching for Quarterly Stories and adding it to your library. And I do want to say, just to the other dudes in the chat and in the room, I talk so much during this episode, but it's like whenever I hear talk of like freelancer running your own business, I did it for so long, it makes me really excited to talk about, because it's like there's little tricks I figured out and I don't actually get to implement as often as I did at the time. But it's really I can't say enough like how exciting it is to see what you both are going to build out of this, and wherever that leads, I think is going to be an adventure and a cool thing. And honestly, like you guys are both kind of heroes in my eyes. So just seeing, well, no, because you guys are you're making art continually and you're building something. So that's exciting. You know? Yeah,
I'm definitely excited. So Chris, what about you? Where can everyone find you? Anything in particular you want to promote or tell people about?
Oh man, well, I'll always promote Monkey Junk. You guys can check that out at monkeyjunkcomic.com. There's a ton of stuff on there. We've launched our store a couple of weeks ago, so you can finally pick up the comic, and there's a ton of other cool stuff in there, and kind of making that website like a little hub of information. So if you've read the comic and you want a little bit more, there's going to be a lot more over there, like free downloads, character bios, that sort of stuff. So
Josh is holding up the comic. You want to hold that comic up again?
Oh yeah, no, I was just doing like Vanna White type stuff, like.
Yeah, I saw that you got the comic yesterday, man. I'm glad it arrived safely.
Yeah, I'm glad it did too, man. It looks great. I love that it's on newsprint. It's like makes me so excited.
Oh, is it? Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got the digital, but yeah.
Really like kind of cool paper, you know? Very nice.
Yeah, definitely all Turner's fault. All the everyone getting so excited about it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do my best to get newsprint, and I was lucky enough to find a printer that did it. So yeah, it definitely makes a difference. I've had a few good comments on it. But yeah, apart from that, just check me out on Instagram and YouTube and everything at Chris McQuinlan Art. So that's the easiest place to find me.
Yeah, and Chris's link, his YouTube link is in the description, as well as Josh and myself. And you're on my channel, so hopefully you know who I am. But if you don't, I'm Scott with CircWorks. And like, once again, I always want to promote my Comic Maker Starter Kit. If you go to circworks.com, you can get that. It is free. There's a lot of places you can sign up for that on the website. And
wait, Scott, you how much was that? I was that like $100? I mean, there's a lot of assets in there that I could really use.
FREE, free, totally free.
Free.
Yep. So yeah, and as far as this show, the Artcasters, we do this every week, unless, you know, sometimes holidays are coming up, so we'll see what it looks like moving forward. But usually every week. Sometimes it can vary the day or the time and things like that. So if you want to know it, and also the channel, it's on Josh's channel, and then it's on my channel, and back and forth. And that can get a little confusing, but if you don't want to be confused, the best thing to do is to join our newsletter and our mailing list or whatever. We don't spam you or anything like that. We just usually about 30 minutes ahead of time, we send out a little invite, a little notice with a link to, so you guys know when we're going to be live. So that is also in the description of this video, so check that out. And I want to thank yeah, there was a lot of great stuff in the chat. So thank you, everyone in the chat. We really do appreciate it. Thanks to everyone watching this after the fact. And we will see everyone hopefully next week.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.